Welcome to another weekly episode of Marked Out Radio. I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
And we have a very special kind of last-minute episode. We had a last-minute guest jump in today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the guest. I'm going to talk about our website, and then we're going to get right in. So stay tuned. After the break, we have the good doctor, Dillon Hines. So if you're shopping for autographs, please check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com or our eBay store at Marked Out Collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook. All links are in the show notes on Facebook and Substack. So without further ado, welcome the good doctor, Dillon Hines. Dillon, how are you?
Doing wonderful. Doing wonderful. Thank y'all so much for having me.
So let's just jump right in. You've come up a couple times, in various stories and people posting on Facebook and all this stuff. It seems that lately, and I don't really, just in the interest of full candor, we don't really know each other. I think I met you in passing once or twice, really, really fast. We never really met each other. I noticed that lately there's been a bunch of drama, I guess you could say. So Dana, which aspect of the drama do you think we should go into first?
I think honestly the first question that would sort of tie it all together would be, why do you think there's any particular reason why a lot of drama seems to always find you, as far as people coming after you and stuff like that?
I'm truly not sure. I'll say this, for whatever reason, even when I was in school, I was always someone that was people would find easy to take advantage of, or bully, So I guess in my adult life I'm that way as well, although I don't see it that way. So I guess that's my answer.
So did you always, just to get back into kind of a little bit of background so people know who you are. So you grew up, and forgive me if I get any details wrong because I'm not sure. You grew up kind of adjacent to the wrestling business. Your dad was a professional wrestler for a really long time. How was that for you?
It was all right. I'll say this. My father wrestled in the 80s. That was when he had his big career, right? And most of that career took place in the 80s. He started in the 70s. He wrestled off and on in the 90s and 2000s, for different groups and stuff. But mostly he wrestled in the 80s. I was born in 1999. So currently I'm 25 years old. So I never really got to experience his career. I wasn't there for the majority of when, I wasn't there. I wasn't in existence when he was wrestling on TV. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
And did you feel like you sort of, because you got into, I guess the way you got into wrestling, and again, if correct me if I'm wrong, is to mostly booking talents and stuff like that. Did you feel like you were kind of destined to be sort of a part of the business, or did you start doing this because in proximity to your dad? How does that get started? How does that work out for you?
So I started off in it I'll say this, at the age of, all right, so I was born on April 29th, 1999. I'd say April 30th, 1999. I was on the road and with my mother and father who were promoting events. My dad tells a story. He was riding with Cornette and Cornette's mom, way back in the early 80s, right? Before Cornette actually broke it in. He was a cameraman at the time, right? From Memphis. Jerry's promotion. And he sat there and he told Jim Cornette, he said, Jimmy, because that's what he calls him. He says, Jimmy, I don't think you'll ever be a wrestler or this or that in the business. He said, but a manager I could see, or someone that's in the office, I could definitely see that. He said, I think you would excel further at that, right? I'm not an athlete, so I think it was always kind of my thing where I was more of an office type person. I'm not a manual labor person either. Although there's people out there that do manual labor, and my hat's off to them, I'm not a manual labor type person. I'm more of a go to a working job in an office type person. You know what I'm saying?
So it's the kind of thing where you were on the road with your dad. You had had a ton of exposure and experience, in the industry and near the industry, and and the promoting piece of it, and then so you sort of fell into that as your path, basically.
Well, to talk about the promoting, I would say kind of correct. My mother and father didn't just promote wrestling events. They also promoted off the street boxing, like amateur fights, which were called the Toughest and Baddest Brawl, TUFFEST, Baddest BADDEST Brawl. So the Toughest and Baddest Brawl. These were mainly ran in the Carolinas, although they did events throughout the East Coast and stuff. They never hit the northern area, but like they were able to go to Florida and Alabama and Georgia and some other places. They did Tennessee as well. Of course, they did North Carolina, South Carolina. So I grew up around that in a way where my dad was actually the ring announcer for these events, these boxing events. And I remember being like 3 years old, sitting next to him while he's announcing these boxing events.
So did you kind of feel the draw that I really want to be near this? I want everyone to be a part of this. At 3 years old, I mean that the world is so bright and big and huge, and I imagine those kind of environments, it must have been like, I have to be part of this. I have to be near this.
Sort of. I'll say this. I was kind of drawn to that. I remember going from town to town with my dad. I was like 3, 4 years old, putting posters up and stuff. Where I started learning how to do all that stuff at 3 or 4 years old, how to promote a town. Which at one point, before social media was big, that was the sole way of promoting those towns. You would do
that was the only way.
Well, you could still, back then you still had TV, and if you could get a TV commercial, and you had radio, but if you weren't putting posters up, which honestly, locally, I think that's still a big thing. Although the internet's the internet, and everybody can see it, you still got to hit your local target audience.
Right.
You know
so
at
what point did you start, booking appearances and signings like on your own, where you said, okay, I'm going to do this as my own thing, separate from, my parents, separate from everything. I'm going to make this my thing.
Well, in my timeline, I don't think that's the most interesting part to get to yet. I think my most interesting part is a couple of my interactions. I remember being 4 years old and meeting the guy that we all would, I guess, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy that is the Babe Ruth of professional wrestling, Dusty Rhodes. That was pretty interesting. Where every time he saw me, he called me his boy. And I'll say this, I didn't realize, because I'm a 3 or 4 year old, right? At that time, I didn't realize who this man was. I thought he was just a cool guy, in the locker room, right? But I got to find out later on, like the older I've grown, that this man that was calling me his boy, was the Babe Ruth of professional wrestling, one of the greatest of all time. No doubt about it. But also, I got to meet Buff Bagwell when I was 3 or 4 years old. There's a picture somewhere. I don't know where it's at, but there's a picture of me being 3 or 4 years old wearing his hat and stuff when I was little, and stuff, when my dad had him on events. Which, for Buff, I'm very proud and happy for him. How here in the last couple of years, he's truly cleaned his life up. I think we all need to give a round of applause for him for that. And I got to meet tons of other talents. So, like Ivan Koloff and stuff. It was pretty cool. Looking back, I really didn't realize who these people were, but looking back, these people were, major stars in the industry.
For sure.
And did you find, and looking back, it must be kind of interesting because, to us, I mean, I'm almost double your age. So to us, if I were, meeting these people, for me, it would be a whole different experience because it would be, nostalgic. But to you, I imagine when you were a little kid, these are just your father's friends, more or less.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't even understand at the time their historical significance.
Right. Like I said, I didn't realize who Dusty Rhodes was until I grew I'd say when I was 8 years old, I kind of got to find out who he was because at that time I was collecting the action figures and stuff, Which, matter of fact, that's where I guess you could say I became like a whatever, about booking. I would actually, all right. So some kids at that age, between 5, 6, 7, 8, they're able to do the piano, or they're able to do basketball or whatever, right? They have some kind of ability, right?
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I had these action figures, right? The Jax line, the Jax Classic Superstars and all the
Sure.
other
Absolutely.
figures they came out with. Which, honestly, in my opinion, I think they're far more superior than Mattel. Nothing against Mattel, but I didn't like. I never cared because Mattel kind of came out when I was probably 10, so I was still kind of in that phase of playing with the figures, and stuff. I thought that the Jax was just a lot better. Plus, I like the Classic Superstars line. But yeah, I was able to go and book matches with these guys and stuff with these action figures and stuff, So that was pretty cool. I that's how I kind of learned, and then playing the video games as well. They had the SmackDown vs. Raw series, which they had the My GM mode. Well, I had a roster on there, of course. I don't know if y'all played those games or not, but you were able to create your own matches and everything.
Yeah.
I would say, what were you saying?
No, I was saying I know what you're talking about. I used to play those as well.
Right. Um. So with that, I was kind of able to learn booking as well, which at that time I was 7, 8, 9, 10. Who would have thought 10 years after the fact, 15 years after the fact, I'm working with these talents.
So how did you make that leap? I guess was it the I guess what spurred the desire? What was your first entry into the booking talent world, basically?
Okay, so I started doing a lot of stuff with Abdullah the Butcher, which he gave me the name The Good Doctor. And what were you going to say?
No, that's fun. That's interesting.
Yeah.
What's the origin of it? Is there any particular
that.
origin of it, or?
Well, my dad was friends and still is to this day friends with Abdullah the Butcher, dating back all the way to the time in the late 80s when he got to know Butcher, especially when he'd go over to Japan and everything, They got to become great friends. I remember talking about when I was going back to a little bit, just when I was very little. I remember when he was wrestling against my dad on some of the shows and stuff. So, because at the time, my dad did a couple events in Circleville, Ohio, at the Pickaway Fairgrounds Coliseum. So I got to meet tons of talents on there. That's where I got to first see Shark Boy. And then another talent that wrestled on those cards was Eddie Gonzalez, which I'm sure y'all know that name if y'all have followed along with Squared Circle Expo. Eddie Gonzalez at one point was just a local wrestler before he got into the game of promoting. Do y'all know that name?
I
Do you
don't
know this,
think I
Dana?
do.
No.
I'm not super familiar with that show. I don't. I'm trying to think. I'm not that familiar with that show, so I really didn't know who was behind it.
Yeah, that's one of the guys behind it. It's Eddie Gonzalez. Great guy. But I started getting to know some of these guys and stuff, And Abdullah the Butcher was the first talent I actually began working with. So
I remember years ago. I think I told this story before on the podcast, but I always appreciated kind of the funny, wrestler instincts of a guy like Abdullah the Butcher. I remember he was booked. I think it was for Sinomania in Pennsylvania, and I got up to him on the line, and I was excited because this is like a larger than life character, and I remember he had a fork that he had at the table, and he was like $5, and I was like, for what? He's like, you'll see. I was like, all right, whatever. I'm going to say no. And so I gave him $5, and he took the picture, like stabbing me in the head with the fork. So it was worth the $5. It was pretty funny. Yeah, he's an interesting character.
Which I'll say this, with how y'all were talking about photo ops last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paying for photo ops, because I kind of follow along a little bit with some of the stuff y'all do. Which I listened to the other episode, which we'll talk about later on with y'all's experience with I think it was Chiller Theater or whatever, but we'll talk about that in a little while. But I think what's missing now is the cool features of photo ops. Where, at one point when Road to Rare Animal was alive, you got to wear the shoulder pads. Now, how many people would actually, say, all right, I definitely want to get that photo op because I get to wear the shoulder pads, right? These shoulder pads that, Road
Well,
Warriors.
yeah, I mean, yeah, some of them are
Phenomenal.
doing it. Like, Sarge,
No,
Sarge is doing the Cobra Claw. I remember one of the craziest ones, and I think many of us have this experience of meeting Bob Backlund, and without even before you're even ready for it, he slaps you in the chicken wing, and let me tell you, I felt that for a few days afterward.
Right.
But that was a cool
he would
shot.
turn your head completely around.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
unfortunately never got to really meet Bob, so.
Oh no, Bob, he would snatch you up. You were not ready. You were not ready for it, and so it made for a great picture. Actually,
No.
even my picture with Bob is great because you looks like he's ripping my head off, and my mouth is open. I was screaming. He got me good. It was great. I mean, it's just one of a really cool kind of novel experience. But I agree with you that those kinds of experiences, whether it's wearing an outfit or getting stabbed in the head with a fork, or a Billy Jack Haynes. This guy was 60 years old. He snatched me up in a full Nelson, lifted me off the ground. I love stuff like that. And I always think that that's kind of a key part of the experience.
Right. But then a photo op with someone, some of these talents you pay $100 to get a photo op with, right? Or $60 to get a photo op with. And they're acting like, they could care less to be there.
I mean, yeah, that's I think it's like a product of the hyper commercialization of it, where it used to be a low money thing, so you get whoever coming out to do it to make a little money, and now that the money's big, then you have people who really don't like doing it who are coming out and doing it anyway because the money's so good, and that's when
It's just a payday.
they don't really do great experiences. I mean, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of talents. The ones who come out and who have a great time meeting fans, and the ones who come out and are miserable meeting fans.
Right.
And, and it's interesting because, when you start booking talents like that, you go, oh, I didn't really realize he would be miserable, but I'm surprised. Or, oh, I really, or his character doesn't, on television didn't look like he was so happy, but he's actually a really nice guy who loves his family. It's hard to predict always, which one, who's who, basically.
I'll say this. I think it's cool that MJF is still a heel at meet and greets. I think that's a missing aspect of the wrestling world where kayfabe's alive. And that's my opinion on him. But some of these other AEW talents, and that's where I find most of these issues rely on it, is these younger talents. They're not very personable with the fans. Like, well, I know we're going to talk about him in a different light later on, but Rob Van Dam, when I was going around and bringing him to these events, he was very personable with the fans, where he would ask them their name, right? And he would, when he was doing the photo op, he'd say RVD, and for example, the person's name was J, right? He would say RVD and Flying J, right? Give him some kind of wrestling name for
right.
Yeah, but
yeah, I think it is
a fun little way to involve them in it.
Right,
but I
it
think
gives them a little bit of personal experience.
I think it's because those guys, when they were coming up, life was hard. Being a wrestler was hard. The money was bad at the beginning. They put in the years on the road. They struggled. So when they made it, there's a certain level of appreciation. Some of the kids who are recently signed, they never really struggled. They never struggled to put food on the table. They never struggled to get gas in their car to the next town, and they're already making six figures. And so there's less of a even an understanding of an appreciation of ultimately the people who make you popular enough to do this as your living. And it's one of those things that I don't know how you can really even avoid that. When you talk about the old, the guys who are super personable to the fans, your DDPs and those kind of guys, they struggled for years making no money and sleeping on the floor and riding 4, 5, 6 to a car so that they, once they did finally start making money, they kind of understand and appreciate it more. I think that's what we're. Some of these 20-year-old girls who are signed to six-figure contracts, they don't understand what it's like. That I'm not blaming them. I mean, if you get paid, God bless you, but they don't really understand what it's like to struggle. And I think that's kind of what the difference is.
Also, when you're getting paid $20,000, you're not going to care much about going and doing these meet and greets. Just The facts of the matter.
Yeah.
Or getting paid $100,000. If you're getting paid $1 million a year, right? Why would you care about a meet and greet?
It's true, and that's why we were joking. What possible reason some of the especially the big name talent is making such incredible money now that even a lot of the legends in wrestling have to do meet and greets because after they retire, they made decent money in the day, but they also had expenses on the road and they have to continue living. Someone like I'll use him as an example, and not even to be insulting, but Roman Reigns made $40 million last year. If he is even a little bit safe with his money, when he retires, he's not going to have to do anything. He's not going to have to do meet and greets. It's not needed. He'll be set for the rest of his life.
Right. Same with the guy like Brock Lesnar. Where y'all there?
Yeah, Dana, you dropped it. You all right? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was saying you'll never see like this errors like Bret Hart or Roddy Piper, like that era. They didn't make that much where they still needed these paydays. Nowadays, the upper tier goes.
Mm-hmm.
How so?
John Cena, he goes out and does a couple Comic Cons.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, but I think
you just said a guy that's like a magnitude of those guys. Well, if you look at those eras, I would say John Cena was a Bret Hart or Steve Austin of this era,
I think John Cena is a little bit different because I think that he does have some appearances that are baked into his TV and movie deals, so he has to do for a little bit. But also I think John Cena is one of those. There are certain guys who
loves the fans.
Yeah, he does. There's certain guys who are interesting like that, like Kevin Nash. I'll use him as an example. Kevin Nash has millions of dollars in the bank that he's not touching. Right, he's talked about it.
Yeah.
He has millions of dollars, and he'll still take bookings every week. He doesn't need the money. He absolutely does not need the money, but he does it anyway. And part of it, and he'll talk about it, is a compulsion and anxiety about money. But part of it is because he actually does get a jazz and a rush out of the experience. I think.
Just to go back to John Cena, at this point, he's not. And I know now, like the wrestling conventions, like the big event, pun intended, is they're bigger than they used to be. But still, when you look at paydays that talent can get from a wrestling convention versus a Comic-Con, like John Cena's doing the appearances that he does, he's alongside like Chris Evans and big others, and like the types of deals, the money, and it's different than like Bret Hart sitting at like a Rahway Armory back in like 2004 for whatever he was getting, even in terms of playing on a Hollywood level now when he does appearances.
Yeah.
So let's just jump in. Let's just jump into the stuff because you mentioned Rob Van Dam. So again, I don't really know anything about the story at all. I just saw a bunch of like stuff on Facebook that happened, and that I think it's still kind of going on pretty recently. What the heck? You booked Rob Van Dam a whole bunch of times, right?
Yes.
So what the heck happened?
I worked with him for 2 years. So my questions for Rob is this. First off, if I was handicapped, as him and these other people on the internet claim, right? Why'd you continue to work for me? If you thought I was handicapped. Because if someone's handicapped, I would say they shouldn't be in highly stressful situations,
It sounds like, I mean, he's obviously he's trying to hit you with some pretty mean-spirited insults, right?
And I'll ask Dana this. Dana and I spoke on the phone early this morning, right?
Yes.
Dana, did you get any feeling that I may have any kind of mental issue?
The job of actually identifying that type of thing, but it was a great conversation. I didn't, nothing like that smacked me over the head. It seemed a nice, calm conversation between two people, and I had no, it was a great conversation. So no, nothing like that jumped out at me.
Which I would say, with you saying that, I would say that it has merit because you do work with handicapped individuals, correct?
I work with all sorts of children. So, I mean, I am, granted you are an adult, but same difference. I work with people. I work with children with different needs across the board. So I do have, I guess, some experience in terms of identifying and seeing. But, I mean, I'm not in the business really of diagnosing.
I guess my question is, though, so RVD is very much trying to hurt you these insults are supposed to hurt you, I guess. And it sounds like they're bothering you. So just what the heck happened? How does a relationship go from being a 2-year, pretty steady? It's my understanding you booked a bunch of times to this where
he's all over with you.
Where he's being very insulting and being really kind of to purposely trying to get under your skin is what it seems like. So what the heck happened?
I would say this. I think part of it is he's upset that we are no longer. It was our choice not to work with him anymore. I chose not to work with him anymore past April. So the two instances that he talks about, which was the final 2 bookings with Big Time Collectibles, I guess he feels they were, that was specifically handled by my father. So I don't know what took place there. I told my father back in April, I said, I'm done with Rob Van Dam. I don't want to work with him again. If you make a bunch of money on a signing, I don't want any of it. Because we were partners, right? My father and I were partners. I told him I didn't want any of it. And I said, I will not partner with you on Rob Van Dam. Any other talent, any other event, I will be happy to be a partner with you on. I said, but Rob Van Dam, I don't want to work with him anymore.
So what changed in April to make you not want to work with RVD anymore?
I'll say this. I'm an adult, right? Y'all are adults, right? Part of it was the name. He kept calling me Dilly, right? My name's Dillon. I don't care. Unless you are a person in my family, like my mother will call me Dillbug, right? Or my grandmother, when she was alive, called me different names, right? Pet names, People give people in our family pet names. That is completely fine. But Rob and I were never friends. We were never anything other than business associates. Rob was never the type of individual I would invite to my home for a holiday or a birthday or anything, and I was never the individual he would invite to his home for any of those matters as well. So
you felt a lack of respect, basically.
Yes. I'll also say this. I was asked by multiple promoters for his wife not to attend events. Nothing against Katie at all, but at these events, and I'm sure y'all have been to events where Katie was appearing, right? She doesn't dress. She dresses very provocatively, I'll say. Correct? Can we all agree there?
Yes.
Where with how she dresses, some convention, Comic Con, events, they have little kids there, right? And it's very possible that they didn't want her at the events. As well as for me, I had to kind of be red-faced when I would bring him in and she would appear with him. And we would have little kids, because there's little kids that are fans of Rob Van Dam, right?
Plenty.
Yeah, of course.
So how she dresses is not PG or G. I would say it's more whatever, like a PG-13 clothing. She dresses like she's going to a club, right? Like a nightclub or whatever. Which, if that's how you choose to dress, and I get that they live in Las Vegas, do whatever you want to do. But I'm someone who dresses very conservatively. There's some vendors out there, they'll show up with talent to an event and they'll be wearing a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, right? Whereas when I do my stuff, I've always tried to incorporate a sports coat into it, unless the weather was just way too warm to wear a sports coat. I always tried to dress, I tried to dress up a little bit, dress like a professional. I'd always make sure I was wearing a collared shirt, whether it be button down or polo, and I'd always wear jeans, and a nice pair of shoes or my cowboy boots. Which I wear cowboy boots every day. Someone the other day made a remark, "Oh, I saw him wearing cowboy boots." Yeah, and I'm from North Carolina. How we dress in North Carolina, a lot of us wear cowboy boots. Like in New York, a lot of people wear loafers and stuff like that. In North Carolina, our typical dress for shoe is cowboy boots.
So it seems like it seems like from what you're saying, you decided for various reasons, mostly I guess you just weren't getting along. Either you didn't see eye to eye, or you didn't have the same values, that you wanted to cut Not anything bad, but you just wanted to stop booking RVD in April, and your
I'll say
dad
this
wanted.
as well. He would have entourages show up and stuff. I'm not for entourage. If you want to bring an entourage with you, that's cool, but I'm not for entourage. If I'm doing business with you directly, right? So if Dana and I were doing business, I'd want to do business with Dana. Now, if there's an agent involved, there's an agent involved. I completely get that. But when it comes to having 7, 8, 9, 10 other people, come on now, guys. It's ridiculous. It gets to be a little ridiculous. Also, there's two versions. I'll say this for anyone who brings RVD out. There's two versions of RVD. There is the one where he comes by himself, and I was told this by a talent. And RVD's all business, right? Whereas there is another version of RVD where Katie comes with him, and he's kind of fun and games, and he'll walk off from the table, and they'll go and get something to eat during the signing, or go and have a smoke break and stuff. But when I was with Rob by himself, Rob was not doing those things. So
Right. So
I
more or
think
less,
it
you
matters
didn't.
for
You
the
felt like
fact.
you weren't getting along with them. You weren't getting 100% of what you expected, what you wanted, what you paid for, etc. And then, so bottom line was, in April, you made the decision to stop working with him, but your dad continued to work with him. And then so what?
One other thing I would like to add was that I saw the coming of the future, right? I saw that eventually we were going to either A, run out of places to bring Rob to, right? Which I felt that we pretty much, you got correct me if I'm wrong, but I brought him in everywhere possible that I could outside of the WrestleCons because those are completely different animals.
Yeah.
I brought him to every single wrestling type thing that I could bring him to. Because he appeared at River City Wrestling Con. He appeared at WrestleCade. He appeared at Big Event. He appeared in Ohio a total of 4 times. I believe it was 3 or 4 times. He appeared all over the place. So,
So the business just stopped making sense on your end to keep dealing with him
right.
with all the baggage and the business, the money.
Right. I felt that with what he was getting paid, eventually it wasn't going to make sense anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because, like Dana and I talked about early this morning, of course, the first time you bring a talent to an event, it's going to be a complete home run. You're going to knock it out of the park. Right, guys?
Hopefully.
If you got a good talent, usually you're going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
On average, you should knock it out of the park if you got a phenomenal talent you're bringing in, which Rob Van Dam, he was a phenomenal talent. I'll give him his due. However, when it comes to bringing a guy in 2, 3, 4, 5 times, fans are going to eventually run out of stuff to bring to get signed, right? Once they
The
have
average
a
fan, for
photo op,
sure.
right? Once they have a photo op with Rob Van Dam or any other talent, they really don't need those photo ops, right, guys?
It's true.
Yeah.
Because it's not like where you got Sting appearing in the face paint and different gear and all that stuff, or there's some guys you could get multiple different photo ops with just because of how they are at these signings. Whereas
I,
Rob's always Rob, you know.
okay, so in
And
April, you stop. You say, I'm not going to book him anymore. That's it. And so your dad still wants to book him, I guess. Is that what happens? And then the dispute comes between them.
yes, yes.
So how'd you get dragged into the dispute then?
Honestly, I don't know. I think because he felt like I was there at these signings. So the two signings that are in question would be Jackson, Mississippi Comic Con, which I was only there due to this. Kevin Nash was booked for it, right? And I was originally not planning on attending the event. I never bought a flight or anything until the day before the event. Kev called me and he said, "Kid, looking forward to seeing you this weekend." I said, "I'm not going, Kev." He said, "Well, honestly, I would." He said, "Honestly, I just want it to be us working together." He said, "I don't like other people being involved." Kev is very funny. I don't know if you realize this or not, but outside of Gilbert Boyaz, who does primetime appearances and things that Gilbert's gotten him booked on, Kevin has only worked with me for like the last 2 years as well. Have y'all seen that? Noticed that?
I
I
know
really
I've
haven't been
seen
following it.
I've seen that he's worked for you. Before you said this, would I have known that it was really only you or Gilbert? I wouldn't have really paid close enough attention. But I mean, I have seen you guys, linked on a lot of appearances.
Right. Continuing on, Rob was, how I was with Rob at that time. I really didn't even want to drive Rob Van Dam to the event. I told my father, because my father had rented a vehicle, right? And I said, I'll drive Kevin and I to the event. But I told him that him or his girlfriend would have to go and pick up Rob Van Dam, which Rob was ready to go and Kevin was ready to go. And reluctantly, I ended up driving Rob to the appearance. As well as reluctantly, I had dinner plans with Kevin Nash. And for whatever reason, Rob Van Dam and his wife ended up joining us, which nothing against them. But at the time, after April, I didn't want to hang out with Rob Van Dam. It had gotten to that point where I couldn't stand the guy, you know? No, just because I was tired of him insulting me. Where, you know, I
So
just
it's
didn't
my
care for it
understanding that
anymore.
so it's my understanding that he's kind of complained about, and I don't know exactly the details of it, but he's complained about not getting paid. So you're just saying that you had nothing to do with it anyway. So he was insulting you outside of this, and I guess he confused you and your
And
dad. He
event,
says, yeah,
the other event was in Cleveland, Ohio for WrestleCon SummerSlam weekend. Again, Rob Van Dam was not my guest. He was working specifically with my father. I have spoken to my father. My father said that on Saturday, how the event looked like it was going, Dad quit, right? He up and quit. He told Rob, he said, you got all the pictures, you got the markers, you got your sign, because we had a banner made up for him. For other signings we had done with him, we've had a banner for about a year or so. And he said, take it, Rob. Anything you keep at the table, you get to keep. I don't know how much Rob brought in at the table, so I can't comment on that. And I don't know what happened in Mississippi. I know that my father brought extra money down, considering the fact that the guy at the Comic-Con was reluctant on advertising the appearance for whatever reason. Rob was
so
not
you
advertised for Mississippi until the week of.
so you think the issue is that Rob expected to be paid sort of a guarantee in advance, and he didn't expect to be paid at the table like that, and then so he, for whatever reason, he decided to take it out on you, more or less.
How we paid Rob was always following the signing, as we do with several other talents, just because that's how our practices are. We pay you after the signing. That way all the business is done and then you get paid, right?
Well,
And
was he working on a guarantee, or was he working on a split, or what was like the?
he was
Uh,
working on a guarantee, I guess. I don't know what the business deal was because I didn't have
right.
him booked for me at that event. I really can't comment. He also brings up Philadelphia. What took place there, and I found out other things about Philadelphia afterwards, which highly upsets me. We did a event at a casino on the Sunday following the signing, where Rob was to go and sign some autographs from people and stuff, and kind of do like a watch party type thing with the fans for
Right.
WrestleMania. And first off, I was paid some money for Rob to go do this appearance. I think that upsets Rob. And then the other fact was that he says that I got drunk and fell asleep there. I would like to state this. I did not get drunk and fell asleep at the event. What took place, first off, outside of making money from wrestling, I don't care about wrestling. So wrestling is very boring to me, right? I find it stupid. I don't know. I think it's cool that there's fans of it, but I'm not a fan of professional wrestling. I would rather watch anything else in the world, including, a historical documentary, rather than watching wrestling. So I had WrestleCon's typically a very long weekend, especially for the vendors because it's long hours, and all that stuff. Lots of business, long hours. I fell asleep at the signing. After the signing so we were done with the signing. We were all sitting in an area. Everybody was watching WrestleMania, and I ended up falling asleep. Right? I had done all my work. Everybody was just sitting around eating and hanging out and stuff, and I fell asleep. I'm sorry that I fell asleep, but who wouldn't? If you're in it, like the room was dark, right? If you're not entertained by a product that you're watching, right? Who doesn't fall asleep? Unless you're
Yeah.
actively, you know.
So it sounds like the working relationship with RVD ran its course.
And I haven't
At
got to
this
mention all
point,
of it yet. He
okay.
also ran up a bar tab of over $800 from what I've recently been told, where I was accused of skipping out on the bill. First off, I was never presented a tab for that when they were all eating and stuff. Second off, I looked at a photo earlier today. I was going through my phone. I'm currently deleting anything to do with the wrestling world. I've gotten rid of all of my contacts, as well as I got rid of. I'm not attached to any wrestling Facebook pages. I do have a Facebook page that's private. It's got like 100 friends on it, and it's just for my friends and family that I personally know. It's not for wrestling people. So, I'm done with the wrestling, but with seeing that photo, I was eating a hamburger, French fries, and drinking a bottle of Fiji water, right?
Yeah.
Which I would say that meal was probably $20, $30 since we're in a casino, It shouldn't be more than that. I don't know where they got $800 in bar tab, but I do know this. I had paid for meals for Rob specifically before. I will say this. Rob is known for running up a tab. But also, when you're bringing an entourage with you, I got no problem taking care of a talent, right? Buying him a meal. Zero problem
Yeah.
with that. Within reason. Also, I do have an issue with paying for an entourage of people. First off, I don't know your entourage. I don't want to be part of your entourage. And I'm not responsible for your entourage. That is your responsibility. I recall one time my father was brought into an event, and the promoter said to him, "I'd like to buy your meal when you get to town and everything." And he said, "Thank you. That'd be wonderful." In turn, my dad had two other guys with us, and I was there as well. And the promoter wasn't responsible for our meals. My dad ended up taking care of the people he had's meals, which was two other guys and me. So, and here's one other final thing about that tab. I had Rob Van Dam in L.A. For WrestleMania 39, correct? And that for WrestleCon.
Okay.
We went, y'all there?
Yep.
Yeah.
We went to a restaurant, and when we were eating the meal and stuff, Katie Forbes was there. She likes to eat high-end food. Like, she was wanting to order something off the menu that was like $800, right? Which is LA, there's stuff out there that's on food menus that are that price. I think it was some kind of crab or something. But come on now, you can't expect a promoter to sit there and pay $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 for food. It's just ridiculous. Dana, you've brought talent in. You and I spoke about this earlier this morning.
Dana hated spending $10 on chicken tender. Who are we kidding? Come on.
I hated going to Panera. Forget a crab. Jeez. They're not getting shells out of me. Jeez. No.
So it sounds like basically there was a situation where for whatever reason RVD felt like he can take advantage of you and kind of pressure you into doing things that you didn't want to do, and then when you didn't do those things, then he threw a temper tantrum.
Yeah. I never did any appearances with Rob Van Dam after Philadelphia weekend. I was not in attendance at Astronomicon this past year, as I wanted to take some time off, and I was not involved with any of the other bookings that Rob Van Dam was part of for Big Time Collectibles. So he can't judge me off of his final two bookings with Big Time Collectibles. He has to judge who he was working with. I wasn't involved. I was
So, I
I was in Cleveland, but I'll say this: our table, I had Elias there, right? And
Yeah.
our table, specifically requested the people at WrestleCon, which Michael Pacheco and them are great people. I specifically requested that the table be on the other end of the room than Rob Van Dam, just because I didn't want any more involvement. So when he joined Kevin and I at the mill in Mississippi, again, he was working for Big Time Collectibles, right?
Yeah.
So I had no issue picking up a tab, right? Rob sat there and sat in front of me, and you can tell me how rude this is. Sat in front of me and told Kevin, "Hey, Kev, I'd like to talk some business with you, but I wouldn't like Dillon to be involved." While I'm paying for his meal. Now I don't know about y'all, but I take that as a slap in the face.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to talk about business with someone, that's more than fine to talk business with anyone, and I'm not shutting that down. But it's disrespectful when someone's buying your meal to sit there in front of them and disrespect them like that. I had no problem with him talking business with Kevin Nash, but there's proper ways of doing things and saying, "Hey, although this guy's buying my meal, I don't want to talk business involving him. I'd rather talk business privately," which I believe was his little internet thing he's doing now, which is only wrestlers or something like that. Cool, you know? But outside of doing these meet and greets and the events in Ohio, I had no interest in further involvement in the wrestling business. Could have been in further involvement, sure, but I didn't want to be involved any further with the wrestling business than I already was. The opportunity could have called, but I would have probably turned it down.
So, hey, let's move on from RVD. I think it sounds like the relationship deteriorated, and expectations were not met, and there's just kind of been some public nastiness about it. Maybe you could shed some light, because you had posted about this, and I noticed it, and I thought it was interesting, especially given this talent's reputation. What the heck is going on with Riddle?
Matt Riddle?
Yeah.
We had him booked for an event, right? Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
We hear you.
I had him booked for December the 14th. He decided because of whatever reason, which I believe was a couple days before the event, Rob Van Dam had came out and said some stuff. First off, he called me unprofessional. I'm going to say this. He called me unprofessional on this. About instances like the Philadelphia dealing and the other two things that I wasn't involved with. I wasn't further involved with any of that stuff, so I don't know what happened in Mississippi or with Cleveland. I would like to believe that my father's always done business on the up and up. My father's been in the wrestling business for almost 50 years, right?
Yes.
I've never seen anything come out about him that would call him a scammer, unprofessional, or anything like that, right? Like Dana and I were talking today. We've worked with Bret Hart, right, Dana?
Yeah.
Bret Hart's known for going out and saying negative things about people when he's got something negative to say about that person, right? So,
Bill Goldberg.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So, I'm sorry for all the noise in the background. We have home improvement taking place.
That's
but,
all right.
Yeah. But,
So you think what happened with Riddle was that he got?
I believe it was connected with Rob Van Dam.
That's
wholeheartedly believe that. Yes, I wholeheartedly believe that.
Did Riddle decide to hold you up for more? He held you up for more money, or what's the?
So here's the thing. So
he wanted a deposit or something.
day of the event, right? So he contacted me probably on Wednesday, right? He said I want some kind of agreement that I will get paid, right? And I told him, I said, Matt, I'd like to be judged on how we've done business prior, right? Every business arrangement he and I had done was always proper. He did tell me before that he would prefer, he wanted to change the deal. So first we were paying him a flat fee to come do meet and greets and signings and stuff, right?
Yeah.
He saw how the lines were, right? He believed he could make more money on a split, so he requested a split, and we altered the following business arrangements, to where it was split instead of a flat fee. I told him, I said, Matt, I would like to be judged on how you've personally experienced me rather than whatever, right? And he agreed to do the thing. He said, I'll do a promo for y'all. I got the promo on Friday, right? He told me he was going to do one that night. So that was Wednesday. I didn't get the promo until Friday, which he's always been a procrastinator, to his defense. That's just how he is, So, I couldn't expect any more out of him. I honestly didn't expect that promo to come out that night from him. Saturday morning of the event, we were contacted by someone under the pseudonym of Michelle Gray, which later I found out was Misha Montana, which is Matt Riddle's wife or girlfriend or whatever. I don't know what she is specifically, but she's in a relationship with Matt Riddle, and they have a child together. But the morning of, they contacted and said, we need $2,000 or Matt Riddle will not be getting on a flight, right? Now, y'all have seen...
I'm going to be honest. That's pretty uncommon in wrestling to request a deposit in advance. There just aren't too many guys. It's just very few guys who require a deposit.
Yeah.
Now, I'll ask you this. How unprofessional is it to request a deposit the day of?
So what do you make of that?
Is
that because he smelled blood in the water with the stuff from RVD? What do you think? Why the change?
Honestly, I think Rob was involved. But then again, I told him, I said, judge me off my prior experiences. He said, okay, I'll do a promo for you. He did the promo, right? The next day, which is the day of the event, he changes his mind. Now, here's the thing. I sent him the $2,000 deposit, right?
Yeah.
Which I was refunded. To his defense, I was refunded for, my deposit, the day, which was paid the day of, because he requests his agent or whatever she wants to call herself, requested it that day, the day of. So he wasn't getting on the flight unless he had it, right? Which is a holdup, is it not, guys? Is that not a holdup?
It's a little bit of a ransom.
Yeah.
It's not good business.
Right. Later, I found out that instead of the amount that he and I agreed upon, he wanted a higher amount as well. Eventually, it just got to the point where finding out how they were going to be at the event and stuff, the time they were going to show up, it just didn't make financial sense. So I told them, I said, because they were going to get there by 7 o'clock, right? Meet and greet was to take place from 12 to 5 p.m., right?
Yeah.
He was already going to miss the meet and greet. Show started at 7 o'clock. Okay, he was in the main event. Okay, so you have a little bit of time to get your gear on and do this and that, right? But how it just ended up playing out, because they wanted... y'all saw the text. The text, and the text didn't lie. It had the amounts on there.
Right.
Matt Riddle, and so I could see if a talent wanted, hey, I want $5,000 to sign, right? So $1,000 per hour, because he was signing for 5 hours, right? In addition to that, since you all want me to wrestle, I want $3,000 to wrestle. Completely fine, right? I was fine paying him $3,000 to wrestle, but they wanted, I think, $5,000 to wrestle, or it was some kind of exuberant amount, where I didn't, I felt that was unfair, considering how much I know prior of what he was paid, by other promoters and stuff. So I shut the deal down there, and that was that.
I mean, at that point, there's not really anything else you can do. He changed the terms, and
the terms were not agreeable.
See, you showed the screenshots.
It would have
I
been
think you
like y'all
protected
were talking.
yourself.
Mhm. It would have been like I think it was, what was her name, Erica or whatever, the woman you did that signing with.
Olivia.
Olivia, yeah, it was Olivia. So Olivia, y'all talked about her last month, right? It would
Yep.
have been like if she would have said, "Hey, I want an additional $5,000, and I want another first class airfare."
And let me tell you, I was genuinely worried that was going to happen. So,
And if that
I'm
would have
surprised
happened,
it didn't.
how would you have handled that situation?
well, at some point you got to walk away from these people, right?
Right.
Because if they get the sense they can take advantage of you, they're going to keep doing that.
At that
Right.
point, you're just an ATM just shooting out cash. That can't be your reputation.
Right, which Matt Riddle, I felt that was what's going on in that situation, and I also felt that in regards to the situation with Rob Van Dam, he was kind of taking advantage, inviting entourages, and stuff, going and doing calling me a pet name. I always called him either RVD or Rob, right? Out of professionalism, that's his names, right? I never called him Robbie or anything like that, I always called him Rob or RVD, being professional. My name is Dillon. Be professional on that. Call me by my professional name.
Yeah,
There's
it
no need
sounded
for pet
like they
names. We're not
both.
friends.
Yeah, it sounded like they both were trying to see how far they could push you, how much they could get, how much advantage they could take before you'd push back and put a stop to it.
Right.
So then the other piece of drama in recent months was, and I mean, this is a little bit different, I think, but the Kurt Angle signing that was supposed to
Well, you're
take
missing
place.
you're missing one other talent. You're missing Sabu.
Okay, I mean, I didn't hear anything about Sabu, but is there something else connected with Sabu?
Him and Rob have claimed that we owe him money. We don't owe
From
Sabu
what?
anything. So we had him at a signing, right? And he agreed to do a split, which I can send y'all the screenshot of the text, right?
Yes.
He agreed to do a split deal where the flight and hotel would be taken out before any of the split would take place. Sabu fell asleep at the table during the signing, right?
Yeah.
Sabu claims that there was $5,000 or so, $2,500 to $5,000. The numbers I've gotten from Sabu that he feels came in that day. Which, Dana, when you and I spoke earlier, we've mentioned at another event, Sandman appeared, right?
Yeah. And we didn't see anything close to that. So
Not even close.
I can't. No, I can't imagine. Sabu is
And
doing
they're in the
that
same
sleeping
caliber.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, say what you will. Sabu does not draw $5,000, and it just doesn't happen ever.
Yeah, he's
Right.
delusional if he's saying that.
And we paid him $300, right? Because we looked, the money did not come out for the flight and hotel, right? The money wasn't there. So we paid him $300 through PayPal because he told my father, he said, I don't have any money for food or any way to get home or any of that stuff, right? And based on that, my father gave him $300. Reason being, my dad had a respect and love for the original Sheik, which is the uncle of Sabu.
So basically, that was a money-losing appearance.
Right. And for him to say we owe him anything other than what we already gave him, that's bullshit. Pardon
So
the
That's
French,
the
but-
game on a split.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, and we have also experienced it's I think it's an awkward situation when you book a talent on a split and then they get there and they don't do as well as they're gonna do, or they expect to do, or hope to do, or want to do, and then at the end of the day, you're giving them much less money than they hope to earn, and that's sort of that's the name of the game with splits, right?
Right.
And we've all been in that situation where someone is expecting a big payday and they don't get it.
And here was the thing about Sabu, right? He called me every day up until it was the week of the event, called me every day until I think it was Thursday when I finally said, all right, I'll try to help you out. He called me every day that week trying to get on the event. So.
So let's get into what I mentioned. The Kurt Angle thing. So,
Yeah.
this was a situation, and the guy, I guess that guy, he released some audio, and I understand that's why you're
Zombie
pretty
Hideout.
you're pretty hesitant about people recording you and stuff like that. So what was the deal there? I mean, what was the angle was booked, I guess, at their store, and then what happened?
So I canceled out of the Captain's Corner event, right?
Captain's Corner that's a convention.
Yeah, Wrestling Classic.
Got it.
I canceled out of that. They were partnered with Captain's Corner on that event, right? In turn, they banned me from their store, which is fine,
So what happened before we go into it? What happened to cancel out of the was it a financial thing? It just didn't work out, or what? Why did you cancel from the event?
I'll specifically answer. I'll give you the absolute truth on it. I spoke to someone that lives in that town, right? Earlier on this podcast, we were talking about forms of promoting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How do you? I'll ask you all this because I gave you all the answer earlier. How do you all hit your your local target audience?
Gotta do posters. You gotta do targeted posts on local groups and some of the signage.
So what I was told was there was no posters or signage in the town, right? Throughout the town. Had gotten very little pre-sale. I was going to walk in there with $20,000 worth of talent, right? Maybe a little bit more. A month prior, I saw how this was going. I saw that the event was not being advertised as it should be. And instead of going and taking a major loss, I pulled out completely.
Yeah. The funny thing is, that's something that, look, no one wants to do that, right? That's a huge ordeal, and I know that's the thing that no one wants to do. But I've seen it happen at other cons too, where you think the ticket sales are going to be low, and you realize my job is not there to bolster these people's pockets, basically.
Yeah.
So you pulled out of Captain's Corner. You pulled out of Wrestling Classic, and then you get banned from Zombie Hideout. Okay, so then what?
That's pretty much the story.
So then but then there was an issue with the money, where people had pre-ordered.
Oh, okay. So how this took place was I was signed to a deal with Eventbrite, right? Beginning in March of 2024. And they were the ones who sold the tickets. Y'all ever used Eventbrite before?
No.
Typically, they do payouts following the event. That's their typical way of doing their stuff, right? Kind of like a Ticketmaster. And through that, I didn't have access to the funds, although I've been able to figure out how to do it and stuff. So what I was telling everyone was contact Eventbrite, right? Which I hope everyone was giving back their money through Eventbrite. I don't know if they were or not, because I've stopped using Eventbrite in 2024. After the deal ran out, I said I won't be using their programming again. Just because I didn't feel that it was a good fit for me. I didn't like how paying out after the event and all that stuff, right? I like to be able to have it where brown paper tickets, which I've used brown paper tickets since 2016, because we had Sting in an event in Chillicothe. That was the first time we used brown paper tickets. And with that, and the use of the brown paper tickets, they pay out through PayPal. Brown paper tickets does, which is automatically in your account.
Yeah, there's no holding involved, like Eventbrite.
Right. So I'm not, it was a completely different format. I didn't like it. I was not used to it. And that's where the facts of the matter of all that is,
So, do you know if the people who had pre-ordered for that Kurt Angle event, were they eventually refunded at some point?
I manually went in and was able to refund for the January 13th event that was supposed to have taken place.
So all those people are made whole?
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, ultimately, all's well that ends well, I guess.
Happy ending.
Yeah.
So I guess the issue was that and I'll just kind of like summarize the guy. It seems, again, I'm not party to any of this. It seems that the guy from Zombie believed that you wanted him to pay out of pocket for refunding these people.
I'll say this: I didn't know the phone call was being recorded. Right?
Yeah.
I was never given whatever until the near end of the phone call. Did y'all listen to the phone call?
A little bit of it, but it was very long. So I was a minute, and that was it.
Right.
And plus, it
I
was
got
at
the
the
gist.
time it came out, so I don't know if I even would remember every detail. But
Okay. So I was never informed that I was being recorded, right?
you're that much.
So several of the remarks on there was complete bullshit. And again, pardon the French, but that's what it was, Where, of course, I agree. Everybody should be refunded, which I handled that day. But outside of that, I have no whatever,
So the bottom line is, it sounds like everyone who go
right.
ahead. Yep, sorry. Everyone who paid for the event was refunded, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, did you lose out on that? I mean, did you pay for anything for Kurt, or at the end of the day, it was just you didn't lose anything on it?
I didn't lose anything. Actually, I take that back. I lost a flight.
Yeah.
I'd purchased a flight prior, and I lost on the flight, which that sucks, but that's life.
We've all lost flights.
Yeah,
you probably lost. You probably have lost your fair share.
Talking about
over
losing flights, just go back to Sabu real quick. We were trying to help Sabu out. There's been other talents we've tried helping out at different times. Like, for example, Buff Bagwell. We talked about him earlier, and I'm extremely proud of him. How I don't know if y'all have seen, but he's getting his life completely in order. Buff is kind of faded out, and now he's good old boy Marcus from Georgia, right?
Yeah,
right.
Just a great guy. He goes to church. He's a family man, He's living his life proper, right? So Sabu, we tried helping out. We had him booked for an event, and he contacted us the day of. He said, "Hey, when's my flight fly out?" Right? His flight was to flown out like 5 hours prior to when he sent me that message. So I ended up having to buy a second flight, and had to eat the money on the first flight. It was just ridiculous. But that's Sabu for y'all. Yeah. And there's other documentation where Sabu's had screw ups and stuff. And I hope he, like Marcus, like Buff, is able to get his life back in order. I pray that he ends up getting that life back in order. Of course, I'm fading away from the wrestling business, so I probably won't see it, or hear of it. But I hope that Sabu is able to eventually get his life set straight, and he's a completely different person, eventually. So, because even Brett Lauderdale, who does the Game Changer Wrestling, had him booked for the Indie Wrestling Hall of Fame in
I remember
Philadelphia.
That story. Yeah.
And Sabu no-showed it. And I'll tell you this. Guess who ended up paying that money back to Brett Lauderdale?
Who?
I did. I paid him.
How'd that happen?
Because they were destroying Sabu's name on the internet, right? And I said, Sabu needs a saving grace. And I've decided to be his saving grace. I decided to, I knew he didn't have any money. So I contacted Brett and said, Brett, I'll be happy to pay whatever the deposit was that Sabu owes you. Which I did. So,
and I guess, start, because usually these things typically go like an hour-ish kind of thing. So just, because I noticed you mentioned a few times that you're kind of winding down, that you're kind of getting out. Because, I mean, look, you basically have said it earlier at the beginning that this was sort of what you've been doing for as long as you can remember. And now you're going to be winding down. So is this one of those things where you just need a breather, or you think you're done with these kinds of bookings?
I am completely done. I am going on to greener pastures. I have found other things in life that I want to focus on. And I'm done with the professional wrestling world. Whereas, at one point, I'll admit that I was running the Bobby Fulton page. The other day, I gave full access to the page to my dad and his girlfriend. And through that, they, changed the password and stuff, as I told them to do. As I don't want access to it. I also don't have access to the Big Time Wrestling page. That page is specifically only on there. I got rid of my Good Doctor page, the Dillon Hines page, which later became J. Wellington Radcliffe, when all these things were coming out, because I was tired of people finding my account that I didn't know, and messaging me. Here's the other thing I wanted to touch on. Isn't it a shame that fandom and as Dana had said earlier when he and I spoke this morning, tribalism wins these things rather than who's right or who's wrong?
It's funny. It's actually kind of complicated. I do think it's interesting to talk about that, because I mean Dana and I talk about this all the time. How like I mean, look, it's not, we're not the ones who invented it. It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? But it seems like there is sort of this sort of, especially in this kind of business, there's this general undercurrent of the loudest voices, and the people who are the loudest voices end up being deemed correct in the public marketplace of ideas, more or less. I don't know. All I can say is, because I've never met you, but all I can do, people seem to want to pile on wherever your name is mentioned, and to me, that's it's interesting, I guess, for lack of a better word, as someone who just observes human beings. It's interesting that when your name gets brought up, that there are so many people who are willing to do business with you, willing to exchange money with you, and then speak negatively about you, and that's like a fascinating thing to me, because I know this as a human being. If I truly felt negatively about someone, I really wouldn't do business with them. And so
a couple of things I'd like to add on to this, because if y'all are open to it, I'm open to talking a little bit longer.
I got a few more minutes. A few more minutes.
Okay. Lex Luger situation, right?
Yes.
Sure.
Let's
give a little context. Right, yeah. So basically what happened was, let me just give a little context quick. So you did a signing with Lex Luger. No one doubts that signing occurred. There were photos and whatnot. The signing occurred. And then there was an accusation made that certain people had paid for inscriptions to be written on their items. And the accusation made against you was that those inscriptions were not written by Lex Luger, but were written by someone else. That was basically the accusation. Did I get it right?
Yes, and I'll say what happened.
Okay.
Lex was on a Facebook Live, right?
Yes.
He was signing all the photos and inscribing them on the Facebook Live. What took place was someone placed an order. The order was done, right? We had a very large amount of orders come in for Lex Luger. Like, I think we had like 80 photos or something signed and a bunch of other stuff, right? So in that situation, Lex was doing the inscriptions and stuff once he signed the autograph, right?
Yeah.
You could see that on that video. However, one customer asked for an inscription way after we had, had the item signed, right? I was with Lex at G.I. Joe Fest or whatever in Augusta, Georgia, right? Tony Hunter brought him and Sergeant Slaughter in for the weekend. And I believe one other talent, I can't remember. I think it may have been Ron Simmons was there or something. I'm not 100% sure, but I know Ron's worked with him multiple times. But I only did signings that weekend with Sergeant Slaughter and Lex Luger. So Lex was there throughout the weekend. The item was not able to get signed on the live because, when you're going through all those orders, it's very hard to go back and try to figure out, hey, here's this guy's photo, right? So I brought that item down, as well as several other 8x10s down with me on Sunday for Lex to sign, right? Lex signed that photo. The issue is it was in two different colors. Reason being, we all know that Lex Luger, unfortunately, is handicapped, right? Lex has to use specific type of markers where he uses. Do you all know the Sharpies that have it's like a push pen kind of?
Sure.
Yeah.
He has to use those instead of paint pens. He has issues with paint pens. During the signing, that's all I had was paint pens available, and we couldn't get any other type of marker for the virtual signing, unfortunately. So when we were getting everything signed during the virtual, of course, he was using the paint pen, and he was using one paint pen. He was using a baby blue paint pen, right? The rest of the items that were signed on Sunday were signed in a blue Sharpie. When Lex was signing those items, he signed the inscription in a blue Sharpie. I went on the internet thinking I would get it to go away and apologize for the incident without truly going in putting all of what took place on there, right? Looking back at that time, I was 21 years old. I'm going to say this. A lot of times, I'm going to say two things. In some instances, I've acted out irrationally. To those that has affected, I sincerely apologize. What I'm doing, I'm taking this wrestling experience as a learning, step, being able to learn how to operate business-wise and all that stuff. We all got to start somewhere. Looking back, I was 21 years old, figured, hey, I apologize, it just goes away, right? Well, no, it doesn't. I should have went into full detail of what actually took place, but I did not ever sign that inscription.
So did you actually say, because then, I mean, the details are now fading, this was a while back. Did you say you had signed the inscriptions and then kind of take it back, or what exactly happened?
No, because I actually said that the inscriptions were signed on that live video.
So then where did people get the idea that you signed them yourself?
Yeah,
because people were saying that. I've heard it. I didn't even know. I only heard about it after the fact, but I do know that people were saying that. What was the deal with that?
Why? Because it's two different markers.
Is that it?
Yeah. Why would something be signed in two different markers? Well, now after hearing what truly happened, and knowing that Lex is handicapped and has to use specific markers, are you not led to believe that, yes, it's very possible that, it had to be done that way, where Lex used a different marker?
I'm trying to think back. My memory is foggy. What I do remember, I know that whatever was publicly said back when this happened, I know I had an issue. Granted, I had nothing to do with this, but I just had, because I guess much like you, I have a big mouth. I like, speaking my opinions. And I remember I said, I don't remember. I don't want to misquote anything, because I don't remember the exact details. But I do believe that whatever our conversation was, you ended up blocking me on Facebook after that. And I remember the narrative of that people were saying that you signed the inscriptions. Obviously, I didn't see you sign the inscriptions. I understand Lex is handicapped. I have no clue what happened. But I do remember that was the narrative at that point, and I'm not entirely sure where that originally started.
Right. The other thing is that someone has made a false accusation that we had a talent helper signing items for Brett Sawyer at the gathering in Charlotte of 2023. Totally incorrect. We looked over and noticed that this was taking place, which what she was doing was this person was not connected to us. We never knew this person from Adam. She came with Brett Sawyer. She was driving him from West Virginia down to North Carolina for the appearance. She grabbed Brett's hand and was putting his hand on the 8x10s, from what I have been told. I actually didn't see it firsthand. My father did. And she was putting his hand on there and pretty much moving his hand around to do the signatures. Because of that, never sold any Brett Sawyer autographs, because I knew for a fact that those autographs were not legitimate. They were not authentic. Every other autograph I've ever had available that I have sold, because I never sold those Brett Sawyers, but all the autographs I've sold either came from High Spots, T-Mart Promotions, Wrestling Inc., Fan City Sports, I think is what Barth calls himself. Is that what it is? Or Sports Fan Promotions? It's something kind of name like that.
Yeah, I think Sports Fan Promotions.
Yeah, Sports Fans Promotions. And other means is where I've gotten my products at to sell. Jeff Dino, who runs Wrestling Universe, is another person I've gotten 8x10, or not Wrestling Universe, Pro Wrestling Loot. It's another person I've gotten my 8x10s from. So,
Yeah, one thing I'll say, like, beyond all the controversy that was with the Lex Luger inscriptions, I've never really heard anyone, with the way people come after you, I'm sure there's been people accusing you of, killing Jimmy Hoffa. But that's not like a prevailing, like, theme. I've never really heard you accused of being like a forger. I think
Which
I
even
always
the news articles put out when they talked about it, they said that unfounded claims,
yeah.
no evidence.
See, I saw those
Because
in
there's
the
no
news
evidence of
article,
it.
but I've never actually seen the claims. I've never seen anyone making the claims. I just saw the news article, like
Right.
alluding to them.
Right. Which that news article that came out, the Scioto Valley Guardian, is actually like the National Enquirer of that area of Ohio, where everyone knows it's like the dirt sheet, right?
Yeah.
Not to be taken seriously. And they've actually had people looking to figure out who's their author and who's writing that stuff online, because it's not actually a newspaper, it's a news site. And even like local hospitals and stuff there have tried to figure out who's running the site, from what I've been told, as they've wanted to seek legal litigation against the individuals because of the lies and stuff that's been told on their site. So, you know, of course, they've never had anything legitimately like put up. Like, it's always something kind of drama, which, isn't a good look. Which I get the newspaper should be having some drama in it, of crime and all that.
Yeah.
But also, it shouldn't have the, it should have like stuff about schools closed, for weather and everything. And I've never seen any article like that from them.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't
I
take them
think
seriously as a great authentic source.
yeah. I think the important takeaway is, as you see from the talents' firsthand accounts and their opinions of what happened with you, different articles that make an attempt to sort of summarize all that. What we hear today with your story, telling your side of these hot issues, to say the least. I think it's just always important. And I said this to you today, that when we commented, and I'll speak for myself, not Sean, when I commented on a lot of the issues that were in the news, I was going off, comments in the one side of the story. So I'm glad that today we were able to hear your side. And I'm always a believer, even in my own interactions with people in life, I'm always a believer in that there are three sides to a story. You have the one person's side, the other person's side, and then the truth, when the other people's subconscious and unconscious biases are removed, that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle where there's inaccuracies on both sides. And I think now
So Dana, I would like to ask you and Sean this. What do you believe?
I'll be honest, dude, it's the wrestling business. It's all a work and a shoot at the same time. I'm not really sure what I believe. I think there's probably bits and pieces of reality in even the craziest claim from like an RVD. But I think
RVD, right? RVD's perception of you falling asleep was different from your perception of you falling asleep in that event. You fell asleep. But in your view, it wasn't a big deal. It was at night. It was dark. It was you were bored. You weren't intoxicated or whatever. He had a whole different perspective. At the end of the day, I'm not sure it matters. What the actual reason for falling asleep was. I think the big picture is that when people disagree, and when there's money involved, and when there's reputations involved, people can get very nasty with each other. People can get their back up against the wall and say things. I mean, I think we all do that. I think you would admit sometimes that when people get when you feel like there's an accusation against you, you have to maybe lash out a little bit sometimes. And then you look back on it afterwards and you go, damn it, I probably, didn't want to express myself in that way.
I'll say
I've been there.
There was people that I gave time to that later on I was told that, they didn't deserve the time of day for me to go back and forth with them. Also, Monty and the Pharaoh this week's going to be interviewing Rob Van Dam. I'm very curious of what his remarks will be and what they're going to say. And I'll say this about Monty and the Pharaoh. Just like what we were talking about with the Scioto Valley Guardian, I was actually working with them at one point where I did 2 episodes. We were going to do more stuff, but I ended up deciding, I didn't want to do it anymore because the guy I was doing it with through them, he actually it wasn't getting a hold of me, like contacting me like he should have to continue recording episodes. So I was done there. The final episode I did with them, we had spoken about Mario Mancini, right? Mario,
Yeah,
if you're
before.
if Mario's listening to this, which I don't know if he listens to podcasts or not, but if he is listening to this, Mario, what was recorded that day was what I was told from them without ever speaking to you. So my feelings on the subject after speaking to you was completely different than what I was recorded as saying. They put the podcast out a few days later, but what was recorded was me being told one side of the story rather than, which I was, this subject and everything was thrown at me live, or not live, but while we were taping it, right? So I was asked to respond, and my response was solely based on that. I think that they always like to have a lot of stuff that is one sided. Like, I think it's very interesting that they never interviewed Vito, but they interviewed Eric Sims. You understand what I'm saying? There's certain people out there they dislike, and there's certain people out there that they like. And their dislike for me, the reason they're actually getting involved, I'll tell you this. They wanted to be the first ones to put out the interview of my response to the Matt Riddle situation. It was the weekend before Christmas. It was actually the Friday before Christmas. I was busy doing Christmas stuff, and everything. And I wasn't available for the podcast. I ended up getting interviewed the next day by another party and told the story. And they threw a big fit and said, "Man, we thought we were friends and this and that and all. But in all actuality, you know, it's, you contacted me that day and said, 'Hey, can you come on the air tonight?'" Yeah, we're friends, and I would still like to consider Monty and Pharaoh friends. But, I can't drop everything I'm doing to hop on the air either.
I think
Especially
there's
during the holidays. People are busy with holiday stuff.
I think there's a
Another
theme.
thing I'd like to talk about. Yes.
I think there's a theme in a lot of these conflicts where it's the mixing of the business and the personal. That seems to be kind of a running theme, and I
Agreed.
think because we do have to. We're an hour 40 in now, so we're gonna have to start winding down. I think it's something that I know wrestling in particular is very hard in that way to separate the personal and the business because lots of people they treat it like it's a person. Even we've spoken to so many vendors and watched sort of their behavior, how everyone tries to make every interaction personal as opposed to business, and then it gets tricky. Is this interaction that we're engaging in right now, is it a personal one or is it a business one? And there's a reason why when you talk to people who know a lot about business in general, they say you don't really go into business with your family and you don't go into business with your friends, because if the business goes badly, then what you end up doing is damaging those personal relationships. And it's very hard to maintain personal relationships with people where there's money at stake and there's reputation at stake and things like that. And so it seems like there's a lot of all that mixing in. And
right.
so
I'd like to say this: the false claim of elder abuse. I want to talk about that. Talking about family and stuff. Wait, if you can give me a little bit more time.
Okay.
Duke that does a podcast. Duke Loves Wrestling or whatever out there did a podcast. First off, he did one with Devon Dudley, where Devon dogged me because he said I was unprofessional and stuff. Although I was completely busy doing my event and couldn't drop everything I was doing to go say hello to him, which upset him. And I came around and said, "Hey, would you mind signing these 8x10s to his vendor?" He outright refused and told me, "I'll put blood on your shoes." I took that as a threat and told him if need be, I'd get the police involved, right? But going to the next thing, Duke ended up interviewing my father and I. During the interview, I put it on mute and I said, "Hey, we got a good platform here." I said, "What do you think about this? You and I've talked about this angle for a bit. What do you think about going and, working the angle out of this?" He and I were going to do an angle where eventually my brother would have been involved. I would have been a complete heel. I would have turned against the family, which, controversy creates cash, as not Kevin Nash, Eric Bischoff.
That's Eric Bischoff,
said. Yeah. Right. Eric Bischoff always said. And what we were going to do was, it was going to be ran through our show. Unfortunately, with all of this, it will never get the payoff that it was going to get. But proving the fact that it was a work angle, December the 14th in Waverly, Ohio, I had actually turned on one of our biggest baby faces. That's a local baby face, right? And my father ended up coming out and chasing a Hill and I off. With that said, all it ever was a work. Anyone who wants to make a false accusation of elder abuse, I'll say this: I don't live with my father. Never lived with my father. I live several hours away from my father, and I said some stuff on that podcast that was not proper, and I apologize for towards my father. But what that was complete work. So, with that said, WWE and everybody else has done things where things that were said later on, looking back, weren't 100% proper, but
I think what's happening here is, you said you don't really like wrestling, but you're kind of sucked into this world, and you were a young man trying to figure things out. Some things you realize after the fact did not go over the way you wanted them to, but the way things work, especially when you're a little bit in, public, people perceive things how they want to perceive them, and there's once things come out of your mouth and once things enter the world, it's impossible to claw them back and take them in,
right.
And so that's kind of what. And I you said multiple times that you're 25 and you're kind of looking back on when you were 21. It's a very different world, and
right.
I think that it's the kind of thing that as you you say you're truly leaving wrestling, and
they say, there's a quote: "You grow through what you go through."
Absolutely. And so as we wind this down, any final words from the good doctor before we let you go?
As this will be the final time that I talk to the wrestling world, I would like to thank everyone who ever supported our events. I'd like to thank all of the talent that chose to work with me, especially I saw Misty Hyatt put out a statement in total defense of the company and working with me and everything. Thank you for
that as well.
Yeah. Also, other talents told me that they hated to see me getting out of this and that they wished me well. I wish all of them as well, And if my father continues, gets back in doing the events and stuff, I wish him well. He's someone who's been running events for almost 50 years. It's awfully funny when people go out there and make statements about someone, and it's very few when, we worked with over 100 talents this year. 3 people out of that 100 said something negative, which I think out of that, it's a pretty good look,
It is, though, with the public hears the negative. It's like reviews on products, People will ignore the 10,000 positives in favor of the 1 or 2 negatives. Because that's kind of a bit of a human nature. And I think what we've seen, a lot of these incidents have the same aspect of that human nature come through. I got to say, Dillon, it was really nice meeting you. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope we did right by you as you hoped, and we were able to get your story out there. Our goal is to have this cleaned up audio wise and have it up within the next couple hours. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Yes, thank you, Dillon.
Thank you all so much for having me.
And we're going to let you go, and then we're going to wrap up our end of show. All right. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, Dana, what do you think about Dillon Hines?
I think it's important always to keep in mind, the whole line of work and shoot was kind of blurred. I think that was sort of that whole thing with the personal and the business and the angle and the real life. But it's important to always keep in mind that Dillon Hines is a human being, and you read accusations, you read all the anger from RVD and different people. But at the end of the day, he's a human being. He's a young man who's trying to figure his way out. Is everything he did perfect? Absolutely not. Is anyone perfect? Absolutely not. And I think it's always important to try to just greet the mistakes that people make with maybe a little more kindness. And I'm saying that to myself because I'm sure I was a little judgy in a lot of instances prior to the, so I'm glad we got to hear his side. How about you?
For me, the part that got me, and this didn't, I'm going to be honest, this did not go in any way the way that I expected. The part that got me was when he asked whether we believed him, whether we thought he was right. And, part of me wanted to say to him, it doesn't matter what we think. We're just two idiots, on the internet, basically.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. And I really hope for Dillon's own sake that he realizes that he shouldn't worry about this stuff. And that people are, when you're in public in any way, people are going to say things about you. Some of them will be false, some of them will be true, and most of them will be shades of true and false. And that it seems like, as many people do, he allows those kinds of things to really get under his skin. And I do, for some of the things that people say, I really do understand why. And I think a lot of the disputes can be chalked up to blurring the professional and the personal. And I think it's a general problem we see with this business. Everyone doesn't want to just book the talent; they want to be the talent's friends, right? Well, now we have a guy whose father is a long-term kind of friend / associate / a very good friend with some of these people, and so it creates an additional burden. It creates additional complications. It's a really interesting story, I think, because I really do think even when Dillon made mistakes, and I do think he made mistakes, I think that many people will respond with a viciousness towards him that they probably wouldn't towards other people.
Yeah. And I know personally, I think I got that point across while he was on, but I know I said that to him this morning, that, as you said, like our opinions are, we're two schmucks on the internet. It shouldn't matter. But like talking to Dillon, like between this and this morning, I've spent 3 hours today talking to Dillon. And I apologized to him this morning. I'll say it again publicly on the podcast, that I actually wish I would have been a little slower to jump to conclusions. At least, you hear his side, then you reach your opinion, and then when it's stuff that doesn't even pertain to you, like him and RVD, him and Sabu, all these things, we have no skin in the game. If Sabu ripped off Dillon, or who cares? Like it doesn't affect us. And I think people on the internet with tribalism and whatever else, they're too quick to just be like aggressive and hostile. And I can say right now, if a news story breaks in 3 days about Dillon Hines, I am going to react completely differently than I would have a month ago, just having a deeper understanding in who he is. I think that's always important.
I think he's very, very keen on when people are insulting to him or demeaning to him. I understand why. I think that, again, for his own sake in the future, not here I am pontificating about someone's life, I think he should work his hardest to not care as much about what people say.
I mean, at the end of the day, none of these people matter. None of them matter. The fans, the people in your corner, the people, it doesn't matter. They know him as a professional. They know him as a wrestling vendor. Whether he would stay in the business or leave the business, at the end, it's the family, it's the friends, it's how he feels about himself. I just hope that he's able to just realize that all that crap doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's true. And I really definitely came away. Look, I don't know. The detail. I can't even stress enough. I don't even think the details, of these stories matter. You may have, when you're listening to this, you realize he really, really, really wanted to dive into the details of these stories and saving the evidence and the screenshots and whatnot of all this stuff. And I think the bigger point is a lot of conflicts in general are just not worth having. No. And I believe 100% that he gave Sabu money to bail Sabu. Knowing everything I know about Sabu, that strikes me as true. Okay? It also strikes me as true that Sabu would totally try and take advantage of that. And so it's one of those things that at the same time, what you need to do is, when confronted with situations like that, you pull back. You're not a charity. You're not a keeper of these guys. And I know these guys can be emotionally manipulative. I get it. And especially in Dillon's unique circumstance. But it was very interesting for me. Any last thoughts about Dillon before we wrap it up?
It was an interesting discussion, an interesting ride. I think you really captured it well there, and I'm just glad that we got the look. And I hope our listeners have a new understanding of him, of working in the business, of that line, and growing up in the business. I think it gives you an interesting look of how he's sort of separating what he wants his life to be from what his life sort of was, just naturally.
So, if you're shopping for autographs, check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com or our eBay store at Marked Out Collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook. All links are in the show notes on Facebook and Substack. Also, if you want your event, product, or brand advertised on episodes of Marked Out Radio, reach out to us today at markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com. In addition, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast, and please leave a rating or review. You can leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, or you can leave comments or thumbs up or thumbs down on YouTube. All engagement is helpful for us. Last thing, we have a couple things coming up. We have our WWE ID signings with Jack Cartwheel, Sam Holloway, Brad Baylor. Those are due within the next couple weeks. I think one of them is due the 8th. Brad Baylor is due the 8th, right, of February?
Yeah, the 8th of February is Brad Baylor. The next week is Jack Cartwheel, and then Sam Holloway will be early March.
All right. And, of course, we have several signings at the courtesy of the big event in New York. We have Mercedes Moné / Sasha Banks. We have Lola Vice of NXT, Lita, the Great Khali, Titus O'Neil, Darren Young, and they just announced we are doing a signing also with Hiroyoshi Tenzan. I never thought Tenzan would be in the U.S. again. NWO Japan member. I'm incredibly excited about that. That should be sick as well.
Tom Unger strikes again.
Yeah, I know. Getting these names that no one gets. He genuinely knocked me out. I was completely taken aback, but I'm very excited. So any last thoughts?
No, the busy weekend. Busy podcast this week. I think we got a lot of content. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, we're gonna be. We did our PWJ signings we did 7 signings this weekend. This guest Dillon just popped up at the last minute, so we decided to do that this weekend. We were doing our recap of PWJ next weekend, so be sure to look out for that. And so for markedout.com, Marked Out Collectibles, and Marked Out Radio, I'm Sean.
I'm Dana,
and we will talk to you next week.